r/nosleep. Posted BYU Mandahrk. Ever since my husband has come back from the hospital, he's been acting a little strange. Child abuse. It started the very first night he spent at home after suffering through a grueling couple of months in the hospital. A cold breeze gently wafted through the open window, making the wind chimes sing playfully and sending a comforting tingling down my back as I lay curled up next to my husband. Bright beams of moonlight basked our spacious bedroom in a pale white glow, turning the soft curtains translucent as they swayed with the wind, giving them an almost ethereal quality. I couldn't keep a wide smile from stretching my lips as I watched his chest rise and fall rhythmically. It had been so long since I had slept with my head on his broad chest, letting his heartbeat gently lull me to a deep slumber with his arms wrapped around me protectively. I didn't have to look at the long scar just above his sternum to know that I would never get to sleep that way again. But that was perfectly fine with me, as long as I got to wake up next to him every morning. I remember it all, the fear that made my heart skip a beat when I found him lying face first on the ground next to the car, the anxiety that wormed its way into my belly, seemingly taking a permanent place in there as I held his hand in the ambulance, the devastation and hopelessness that threatened to shred my sanity to pieces when the doctor gave his diagnosis. The impatience that made me chew my nails and hair as I waited for that call from the hospital, and the nervousness that caused me to stab my palms with my fingernails, drawing blood from them while I sat on the metal chair outside the operating theater, incessantly tapping my foot. But most of all, I remember the love in his eyes and in his smile as he held my hand and comforted me, even as he was surrounded by machines that whirred and beeped threateningly. He was the one who helped me stop the madness of it all from overwhelming me, when it definitely should have been the other way around. He was my rock when his own body was crumbling to pieces, steadfastly holding on to weak and flickering flames of hope when I was on the verge of collapsing into a dark pit of despair. I didn't think he'd make it through all that, but he did. No, as he likes to say it, we fought our way through it, and he was finally back where he belonged, seemingly safe from danger for at least the foreseeable future, which is why the subsequent events took such a heavy toll on me. My eyes were droopy, and I was happily drifting off to sleep when I was jolted back to full alertness as his body tightened up next to me. Veins in his arms began to pop out as his hands balled up into fists, making the sheets slither off me. I got up on my elbows to see what was wrong, when his eyes shot open. Sharp, icy blue pebbles that glinted in the moonlight, they were far from what I was so familiar with, those warm brown eyes that looked like they had been dipped in honey. "Dhruv," I whispered, gently shaking his shoulder. "Are you okay?" His mouth opened, and then began moving as he started mumbling something under his breath. I leaned towards him and strained my ears to catch what he was saying. "Get away," he breathed. "Get away. Get away. Get away." "Dhruv," I whispered again, my voice quivering this time. "Get away," he screamed, making me jump back in fear. I looked in abject terror as his mouth turned into a vicious snarl, his teeth gnashing hatefully and his body trembling violently as he kept on muttering like a man possessed. "Get away. Get away. Get away." He sat up straight, his eyes focused on the wall in front and continued with his frightening ramblings. "Get away. Get away. Get away." The words echoed around in the room with such ferocity that my heart pounded in rhythm with them. I finally snapped out of my fear, darted towards the light switch and flipped it on, blasting the room with the harsh white hue of the fluorescent tube. This ended whatever was happening with him, because the next I looked at him, his eyes had softened back to a more familiar shade and were darting around, revealing his confusion. "What?" he croaked, his voice harsh with dryness. "What happened?" "That's what I want to know," I replied, shakily. He had no recollection of his strange behavior, and the only thing he remembered after going to bed was sitting upright in bed and looking at my terrified visage. Everything in between was a complete blank, as if those memories had just been swallowed up by a black hole. He insisted that he was just asleep, but I knew better. I saw him writhe and mumble pure insanity. It was like in those couple of minutes, he was someone else. I couldn't help but think of the strange change in the color of his eyes, but then chose to dismiss it as a mere trick of the moonlight, for my own sanity. He swore that he felt fine, but I insisted on calling an ambulance, and so after a short argument we settled on visiting the hospital ourselves. To my relief, mixed with a dash of shame-filled dismay, all the tests came back perfectly fine, ECG, blood pressure etc., all how they should he. His body was adapting very well to the changes, and the doctor even refused to prepone his regularly scheduled biopsy, before pulling me aside and asking me about my mental well-being. I vehemently disagreed that anything was wrong with me, that the stress and lack of sleep had made me hallucinate it all, but ultimately agreed to get some rest and come back if something like this happened again. It wasn't easy, but I tried to put that incident aside, to dismiss it as an aberration, or a weird glitch in the system and move on with my life. And I had almost succeeded when it happened again, and again and again, with increasingly alarming frequency. Sometimes I would find him in the rocking chair, staring off into the distance with sharp cerulean eyes. But they would be gone as soon as I'd shout his name, retreating into their hiding spot as he was jolted back to reality. Then there were times where I'd find him thrashing around in bed, or mumbling strange things under his breath while walking aimlessly around, a mean scowl on his face and his eyes a now familiarly alien hue. But the most terrifying of it all were the times I would wake up at night, to find him lying on his side, staring at me and whispering right into my ears about how he wanted to kill me. I was afraid I was losing him, to something beyond the scope of rationality. He would never remember any of it, and successive trips to the hospital only ended up with me being prescribed medicines for stress and anxiety. It was a painfully slow and frightening descent to madness for the both of us, one that came to a head on a night not too different from the one that started it all. A loud crash from somewhere downstairs woke me up with a start. My heart pounding and my crusted, bleary eyes blinking in exhaustion and confusion, I noticed that his side of the bed was empty with the sheets a crumpled mess near the foot of the bed. I quickly slipped on my slippers and bounded down the stairs, calling out his name along the way. I nearly peed my pants when I found him. He was sitting on the dining table, violently wrapping some barbed wire around an aluminum baseball bat. The wire had cut into his flesh at many places, and blood was dripping down and staining the expensive wood. His face warped into a snarl, he sat mumbling murderous things, as his ice-cold blue eyes glinted maliciously under the light that crept out of the kitchen storeroom. "I'll kill you, you piece of shit. Just you wait, you little bitch." The guttural quality of his voice terrified the ever-living shit out of me, and I did the unthinkable. I ran upstairs and called the cops on the love of my life. I was crying and blubbering, as I tried to tell the police officer what I was going through, when I heard the front door of the house swing open with a loud creak. I pulled the curtains aside and peered out the window to see him making his way towards his car, his unholy murder weapon slung over his shoulder. What in the world? Where was he going at this time of night? Keeping the cop on the line, I took the keys to my car and followed after him. He was just making the turn off our street when my car purred to life. I was afraid I would lose him somewhere in the numerous perfect grid-like streets of our city, but luck was on my side and I stuck to his tail as he drove on his unfathomable journey. What was he doing? Was he sleepwalking? He had turned his car onto a part of the city that should have been mostly unfamiliar to us, but it certainly didn't seem that way, looking at the confidence with which he navigated the streets. Finally we arrived at what seemed to be his destination, as he began slowing down after passing through an unmanned gate. It was an affluent, gated neighborhood, with rows upon rows of big bungalows lining the broad streets. He parked in front of one such house, jumped out and walked through the wrought iron gate, twirling the vicious bat in his hands. After relaying our current position to the police, I followed after him, ignoring the warnings being blared at me through the phone. The house belonged to one Bashir Ahmadi, and had a well-kept lawn with a gravel path leading to the front door. Dhruv ignored this, and slipped around to the side of the house, smashing through a glass window and jumping inside. The screaming started immediately. My heart sank as I heard the high-pitched screeching of a little girl. No. No. What was he doing? He couldn't. I gulped as I hurried over to the broken window, and looked inside the house, using my phone's flashlight feature to illuminate the dark room. What I saw in there haunts me to this day. My husband was wailing on some naked man with his bat, brutalizing him beyond recognition. The weapon slammed into his bones with sickening thuds as the barbed wire slashed away at veins and flesh, turning him into a gooey mess. I saw a little girl huddled into a corner, sobbing hysterically as Dhruv screamed at the man he was murdering, interspersing each word with a swing of his bat. "Don't. Slam fucking. Slam touch. Slam her." He was going to kill him. I screamed. "Dhruv. Please. Stop." He ignored me and continued to pound the man. "Please. You're going to kill him. Stop." He froze, before looking at me. His tear-filled blue eyes gleamed under the glow of the flashlight, before fading away, letting my scared and confused husband come back. It didn't take long for the cops to figure out what exactly had happened. Bashir Ahmadi, a businessman who had immigrated from Iran with his family, had died in a car crash some time back, leaving behind his distraught wife and a 12-year-old daughter. Taking advantage of his wife's grief, a predator wormed his way into their lives, acting like a good and supportive man as he zoomed in on his target. He attacked little Uzma as soon as he had the chance, threatening to murder her and her mother to secure her silence as he continued to traumatize the child every instance her mother left them alone with each other. Thankfully, he definitely won't be attacking anyone anymore. Hell, he was so badly brutalized, he was declared too disabled to be imprisoned, requiring the assistance of medical professionals to survive. It took a long time for Uzma and her mother to heal from the pain and the guilt, but together they did fight their way through it, and we knew that because they strongly insisted that we be involved in their lives. Dhruv was hailed as a hero, even though he swore he was unaware of what had happened. Angry public, supportive police and activist judges ensured that the local hero got off with barely a slap on the wrist. But he wasn't really the hero, a fact that the two of us gradually understood as more information came to light. After all, it has been 5 years since that night, and my husband's body has shown no signs of rejecting blue-eyed Bashir Ahmadi's heart.
Tell me pretty lies, look me in the face, tell me that you love me.